Welcome, dear listener, to another bedtime journey. In the village of Thistlewood, the villagers rest, unaware of the magic stirring at the edges of their world. Tonight, we'll follow Lila on a mysterious adventure that begins with a whisper in the wind and the soft dance of enchanted broomsticks. But for now, let your eyes grow heavy as you listen to the tale unfold, and allow the gentle rhythm of my voice to carry you to a place of deep, restful sleep. Breathe deeply, relax, and let the story take you away. The village of Thistlewood slept beneath the pale light of the harvest moon, its cobblestone streets bathed in the soft glow of autumn. The fields, now empty of their summer crops, stretched toward the horizon like a forgotten sea, and the chill of October had begun to creep through the air. It was the night when stories came alive, and though no one spoke of it aloud, the villagers had grown wary of this particular night. Halloween was approaching, and with it, the witches' broomsticks. Lila sat by her window, her wide eyes reflecting the flickering glow of the hearth behind her. From her perch, she could see the outlines of the trees that bordered the village, their skeletal branches swaying gently in the breeze. It was a night like any other, or so it should have been. Yet Lila, with her strange gift, felt the stirrings of something old and unseen. The village children had been told tales of the broomsticks ever since they could walk. How once a year they would come to life and wreak havoc on the village. Most dismissed these tales as fanciful legends, but Lila knew better. She had heard them, not the stories, but the broomsticks themselves. In the dead of night, when the world was silent, Lila had heard their whispers, carried on the wind, faint and distant. Tonight, the whispers were stronger. She pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders, leaning closer to the window. The trees rustled softly, and somewhere beyond them, in the depths of the forgotten forest, a faint creaking sound echoed through the air. It was almost like laughter. The sound sent a shiver down her spine, though she could not have said why. From the village square, she could see the warm glow of lanterns as the townsfolk gathered for their nightly tales. The elders sat at the center, spinning their stories of witches and curses, of broomsticks that danced under the harvest moon. Lila had heard the stories 1,000 times, but something about tonight felt different. She had always seen things that others could not, fleeting shadows that moved just beyond the corner of her eye, glimmers of light that no one else seemed to notice. Her grandmother had called it the gift of sight, a rare and ancient magic passed through their bloodline. It was a gift that came with burdens, and tonight, as the whispers of the broomsticks grew louder, Lila knew that her gift would soon reveal more than she was prepared to see. The wind outside picked up, rattling the shutters of the small cottage. Lila's heart raced as she heard it, a faint swishing sound, like something cutting through the air. It was soft at first, almost imperceptible. But as she strained to listen, the sound grew more distinct. It was the unmistakable sound of broomsticks, dancing. Her breath caught in her throat. Every year, as Halloween approached, the broomsticks would come to life, but no one had ever seen them up close. They moved like shadows through the village, causing mayhem wherever they went, and by morning they would be gone, leaving only wreckage in their wake. Lila had always wondered why they danced, what called them from their slumber each year. But now, as she listened to their eerie song on the wind, she realized that this was not a dance of joy. It was a warning. Slowly, Lila rose from her chair, her hand trembling as she reached for the latch on the window. She had to know. She had to see them. But just as her fingers brushed the cold metal, a voice whispered in her ear, soft and delicate, like the rustle of leaves. Not yet. Lila froze, her heart pounding. She looked around the room, but there was no one there. The fire crackled quietly in the hearth. The shadows danced on the walls, but the voice was gone. Not yet, it had said. What did it mean? And why had it come now, just as the broomstick stirred? Lila stepped away from the window, her mind racing with questions. The whispers of the broomsticks grew louder, their laughter more pronounced, as though they knew a secret she had yet to uncover. Outside, the wind howled, and in the distance, the first broomstick lifted off the ground, twirling in the moonlight, its dance beginning once more. Midnight had come, and with it, the air around Thistlewood grew thick with something otherworldly. The village square, once filled with the soft murmurs of nightly tales, fell silent as a gust of wind swept through, cold and biting. It was as if the entire world had paused, waiting for something to happen. Lila stood at her window, her breath fogging the glass as she peered into the night. She could feel the shift, the stirring of magic so ancient that it pulsed beneath the earth like the slow heartbeat of a forgotten creature. Out beyond the village, at the edge of the forest, the first broomstick danced into view. It floated just above the ground, its worn wooden handle twisting and turning in the air as if guided by invisible hands. For a moment it hovered there, silent and still, as though listening to the whispers of the wind. Then, with a sudden lurch, it shot forward, its bristles trailing a line of shimmering dust behind it. More followed. One by one, broomsticks from the old witch's hut, long abandoned and buried beneath the weight of time, rose from the shadows. Their movements were graceful, almost hypnotic, as they swirled in intricate patterns, weaving through the trees with a strange and eerie rhythm. To the untrained eye, it might have seemed like a simple dance, a harmless display of magic. But to Lila, with her gift of sight, it was far more than that. She could see the threads of magic that connected each broomstick, delicate strands of light that pulse with an energy both chaotic and controlled. The broomsticks weren't just moving. They were being pulled, guided by something unseen, something ancient. And as they danced closer to the village, the chaos began. Lanterns hanging from doorways flickered wildly as the broomsticks spun through the narrow streets, their bristles sweeping against walls and knocking over crates. The once still air was filled with the clattering of shutters blown open by the gusts of wind trailing behind them. Hay bales scattered across the cobblestone. Roofs creaked under the force of unseen blows, and the harvest decorations, lovingly placed, were torn from their perches and tossed into the sky. It was mayhem. Lila watched in horror as the broomsticks twirled and spun, their movements growing more erratic, more violent. The villagers, roused from their beds, rushed outside, their faces pale with confusion. They had seen this before. Every year the broomsticks came to life, but never like this. Never with such intensity, such force. It was as though the magic had grown stronger, more uncontrollable. From her window, Lila's heart raced. She could see it now. The faint glow that surrounded the broomsticks, the twisted energy that fueled their dance. It was not a joyous dance, not a simple enchantment gone awry. No, this was something deeper, something darker. The broomsticks were bound by a curse, an ancient spell that had been set in motion long ago. And this year it seemed that curse had grown restless. One broomstick, larger than the others, soared higher into the sky, its handle spinning wildly as it arced over the rooftops. Below, the villagers scattered, ducking into doorways and hiding behind carts. But Lila didn't move. She stood frozen, her eyes fixed on the scene unfolding before her. She could feel it. There was a purpose behind the broomsticks' wild dance, a reason for their destruction. But what? And why now? As she watched, her gaze shifted toward the forest, toward the place where the broomsticks had first emerged. For a brief moment, she thought she saw something. A flicker of movement among the trees, a shadow that didn't belong. It was gone in an instant, but it left her with an unsettling sense of dread. Someone or something was controlling the broomsticks. Lila's hands trembled as she pulled away from the window, her mind racing. She had always wondered why the broomsticks danced, why they caused such chaos every Halloween. But now, as the village crumbled beneath their wild movements, she understood. The broomsticks were not simply enchanted. They were prisoners of an ancient magic, bound to a ritual they could not escape. The thought chilled her to the bone. Outside, the wind howled louder, and the broomsticks continued their dance, faster and wilder than before. They circled the village like vultures, their movements growing more frenzied with each passing moment. Lila knew she had to act. The whispers in the wind had told her as much. But what could she do? She was just a child, gifted with sight but powerless against the forces that controlled the night. Yet, as she turned back to the window, the moonlight caught her eye, casting long shadows across the room. And there, in the center of the floor, something glimmered, a faint, delicate thread of light, barely visible but unmistakably magical. It was a clue, a sign. The dance had begun, but the mystery was far from over. The village of Thistlewood lay in disarray, swept into chaos by the relentless broomsticks. They danced with increasing fury as though driven by an unseen hand, their bristles scratching the cobblestones like nails across a slate. The lanterns that lined the streets flickered wildly, casting eerie shadows that twisted and elongated in unnatural ways. And through it all, Lila stood, watching with wide eyes, her heart beating faster with each gust of wind. She had always known she was different, but now, in the face of this magical storm, her gift felt more like a burden. As she turned away from the chaos outside, her gaze fell once more on the faint thread of light that shimmered on the floor of her room. It was barely there, just a whisper of magic, almost too delicate to be real. But to Lila, it was as clear as the moonlight filtering through the window. She knelt, her fingers hovering just above the glowing thread. It pulsed softly, like a heartbeat, and as she touched it, a rush of energy shot through her. Her gift, the sight she had inherited from her grandmother, flared to life. For a moment, the world around her seemed to shift, the walls of the cottage fading away until all that remained was the thread of light, stretching out before her like a path through the darkness. Lila followed it. The thread wound its way out of her room, through the narrow hallway, and out into the village streets where the broomsticks continued their wild dance. But now, with her sight fully awakened, Lila saw them differently. Each broomstick was wrapped in the same shimmering threads, their movements no longer chaotic but guided, controlled by something far beyond the village's understanding. The threads pulsed with a rhythm, a pattern, and as Lila's eyes traced their movements, she realized they were not random. The broomsticks were dancing to a hidden melody, a spell woven long ago. Her heart pounded in her chest as the realization sank in. The broomsticks weren't acting on their own. They were being pulled by a powerful magic, bound to a curse that was far older than the village itself. "Why can I see this?" she whispered to herself, the words barely audible over the howling wind. Her grandmother had spoken of the sight as a gift, but Lila had never fully understood its power. She had seen glimmers of magic before, tiny sparks that flared and faded, the edges of an unseen world that only she could glimpse. But this was something different. This was a web of magic, intricate and vast, stretching across the village like a net. And at the center of it all, Lila could sense a presence, a darkness that watched from the shadows, unseen but ever present. She turned her gaze toward the forest, where the ancient trees stood like silent sentinels, their branches swaying in the wind. The forest had always been a place of mystery, where stories of the old witch lingered like mist on a cold morning. No one had ventured there in years, not since the witch had vanished. But Lila knew now that the witch was not gone. Her magic remained, woven into the very fabric of the village, and the broomsticks were its instruments. She stood, her fingers still tingling from the touch of the magic thread. There was no time to waste. The village was in danger, and the longer the broomsticks danced, the more destruction they would cause. But how could she stop them? The power that controlled them was far greater than anything she had ever encountered. As the broomsticks whirled past, sweeping through the streets with wild abandon, Lila closed her eyes and reached out with her sight. She followed the threads of magic, tracing them back to their source, deep within the forest. The path was winding and treacherous, but with each step, the vision became clearer. The threads pulsed with dark energy, leading her towards something hidden, something ancient. In her mind's eye, Lila saw it. A stone circle, half buried in the earth, covered in ivy and moss. At its center stood a figure, cloaked in shadow, with eyes that gleamed like embers in the night. The witch. She had never truly left. Her magic lingered, woven into the very roots of the forest, and the broomsticks were merely an extension of her will. Lila opened her eyes, the vision fading but leaving a sense of dread in its wake. The broomsticks were not just enchanted objects. They were part of a larger plan, a spell that had been set in motion long ago. And now, with Halloween drawing near, that plan was nearing its climax. She knew what she had to do. She had to follow the threads to their source, confront the magic that bound the broomsticks, and unravel the curse that held them in its grip. But as she stepped out into the night, the wind carrying the sound of the broomsticks' eerie laughter, Lila couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking into a trap. The broomsticks danced faster, their shadows twisting and merging as if mocking her. The forest loomed in the distance, dark and foreboding, and the path ahead was shrouded in mystery. But Lila had no choice. The gift of sight had shown her the way, and now she would have to face the witch's magic head-on. The forest loomed before Lila, dark and dense, its branches like gnarled fingers stretching toward the sky. The path beneath her feet was overgrown, the earth soft with moss and littered with fallen leaves that crunched softly with each step. The deeper she ventured into the woods, the more the air thickened, as though the very atmosphere resisted her presence. Somewhere far behind her, the village lay in disarray. But here in the heart of the forest, it was as if time itself stood still. The broomsticks' eerie dance could no longer be heard, but Lila could sense them, swirling in the distance, their magic pulsing faintly in the back of her mind. She followed the invisible threads of light that only her sight could reveal, their shimmering path winding deeper into the forest, leading her toward the source of the curse. Each step she took felt heavier, the weight of the ancient magic pressing down on her like a shroud. The trees grew taller, their trunks twisted and blackened as though scorched by some forgotten fire. The undergrowth was thick with brambles, and the air hummed with a low, almost imperceptible vibration. Lila's heart raced as she continued forward, her fingers tracing the path of the magical threads that flickered in and out of sight. They guided her, like the faintest whispers of a voice on the wind. And then she saw it. At the edge of a clearing stood the stone circle, just as it had appeared in her vision. Ancient and weathered, the stones rose from the earth like silent sentinels, their surfaces covered in moss and ivy. The air within the circle felt different, charged with a deep, unsettling energy that thrummed through the ground and up into Lila's bones. It was a place of power, a place where magic had been woven and forgotten long ago. But the stones were not what held Lila's gaze. At the center of the circle stood the witch. She was not as Lila had imagined. There was no towering figure cloaked in darkness, no twisted form hunched over a cauldron of curses. Instead, the witch was slender, almost graceful, her long silver hair falling in waves down her back. Her robes shimmered faintly, like the surface of a dark lake beneath the moon. But it was her eyes that struck Lila most, their cold, piercing gaze that seemed to see straight through her, as though she were nothing more than a fleeting thought. The witch turned slowly, her lips curling into a smile that held no warmth. "You've come far, little one," she said. Her voice soft but laced with something sharp, something dangerous. Farther than most. Lila's breath caught in her throat. She had imagined this moment, prepared herself to face the one responsible for the village's torment. But standing here now, in the presence of the witch, she felt small and powerless. The magic that surrounded the stone circle was ancient, far older than anything she could comprehend, and the witch commanded it with ease. "Why do you do this?" Lila's voice wavered as she spoke, the words escaping her in a rush. "The broomsticks, they're destroying the village. Why must they dance?" The witch's smile widened, though her eyes remained cold. "They dance because they are bound to, by magic older than you could ever understand. A curse, if you wish to call it that, but one with purpose." Lila frowned, stepping closer to the edge of the stone circle. Purpose? What purpose could there be in chaos and destruction? The witch tilted her head, her silver hair falling like a veil over one shoulder. "Ah, but you see only the surface of things, child. The dance is not one of chaos. It is a ritual, a reminder of the price paid for power long ago." She gestured to the broomsticks, still faintly visible in the distance, their dance a shadow on the horizon. "They are bound to my magic, yes, but they are also bound to time itself. Each year they dance, and with each dance, The veil between this world and the next thins. Lila's heart raced. The veil between worlds? The witch nodded, her smile fading into something more serious. Yes, and each year, the dance brings me closer to what I seek. A chill ran down Lila's spine. She could feel the threads of magic around her vibrating, pulling tighter with each word the witch spoke. What do you seek? The witch's eyes gleamed. A way to return, to undo what was done long ago. The village stands upon a place of great power, a place where magic once thrived. I was its keeper, but the villagers turned their backs on magic. They locked it away, buried it deep beneath the earth. The Broomsticks dance is the key to unlocking that magic once more. Lila's mind raced. The village, her home, had been built upon forgotten magic, and now it was at the center of a ritual she barely understood. She took a step back, her hands trembling. But the village will be destroyed. The witch's smile returned, cold and unfeeling. That is the price of power, little one. Some things must be lost for others to be gained. As the witch's words hung in the air, Lila realized the full weight of what she had uncovered. The broomsticks, the curse, the magic. It was all part of something far greater. Something that threatened not just the village, but the balance between worlds. And she, with her gift of sight, was the only one who could stop it. The threads of magic pulsed around her, a silent reminder that time was running out. Lila stood at the edge of the ancient stone circle, her heart pounding in her chest as the weight of the witch's words settled over her. The air was thick with the heavy scent of magic, a mixture of damp earth and something far older. Something that smelled like forgotten places and long-lost secrets. The witch remained still, her cold eyes watching Lila with an intensity that made the girl's skin crawl. Every instinct told her to run, to flee back to the safety of the village. But she knew there was no going back now. The broomsticks were still out there, their dance slow and methodical, sweeping destruction through the village with every turn. But here, in this circle of stone, Lila sensed something far more dangerous than the chaos they caused. The magic that held them was old, tangled in layers of forgotten spells, and at the heart of it all was the witch's unspoken desire. To unravel the veil between worlds, to release the hidden power beneath the village. Lila swallowed hard, trying to find her voice. There must be another way, she said, her words shaky but determined. If the magic beneath the village is so powerful, why do you need the broomsticks to dance? Why cause all this destruction? The witch raised a slender eyebrow, her expression one of mild amusement. Magic is not a thing to be wielded lightly, child. It requires balance. The broomsticks dance is not chaos. It is part of the ritual, the unlocking of power that has been buried for too long. She tilted her head slightly, her silver hair catching the faint light that filtered through the trees. You do not understand the forces at play. The villagers chose to bury magic, to turn their backs on what once thrived here. This dance, it is their reckoning. Lila's chest tightened as the witch's words cut through her. She could feel the web of magic tightening around the village, growing stronger with each passing moment. But as she watched the witch, something shifted in her mind. The threads of light that only her sight could reveal flickered again, showing her something more. Beneath the layers of enchantment, beneath the centuries-old magic, there was a crack. A fracture in the spell that held the broomsticks in thrall. The witch noticed Lila's hesitation, her smile fading into something darker. You see it now, don't you? The fault in the magic. But do not mistake it for weakness. The spell is strong, bound to time itself. Only a fool would attempt to break it. Lila's heart pounded in her ears. She had always known her sight was a gift, but now she understood why. The broomsticks, the dance, the witch, they were all connected by the same magic, an intricate web that could only be seen by someone like her. The fracture in the spell was small, nearly invisible, but it was there. And if she could find a way to widen it, to unravel the threads of the curse, she might be able to stop the broomsticks before they completed their dance. The witch stepped forward, her voice low and filled with a quiet menace. You are out of your depth, little one. The magic here is older than your bloodline, older than this village. If you attempt to meddle with it, you will bring ruin upon yourself and all those you seek to protect. Lila's hands trembled, but she forced herself to stand tall. I don't need to understand it, she whispered, more to herself than to the witch. I just need to stop it. Her eyes darted to the ancient spellbook that lay at the witch's feet. Its pages yellowed with age. The ink faded, but still powerful. She knew instinctively that the answers lay within those pages. The key to stopping the broomsticks, to unraveling the curse. But how could she get close enough to take it? The witch followed her gaze, her smile returning, sharp as the edge of a blade. You seek the book. It will not help you. The words within are beyond your understanding, written in a tongue that died long ago. But you may try, if you dare. Lila's heart raced. She had no choice. The village was depending on her, and time was slipping through her fingers like sand. Summoning every ounce of courage, she stepped forward, her eyes fixed on the spellbook. The air around her crackled with magic, the threads of the curse vibrating with a warning that made her skin prickle. She could feel the witch's gaze on her, cold and mocking, but she pushed it aside. With a quick motion, Lila lunged toward the book, her fingers brushing the worn leather cover. But the moment she touched it, the air exploded with a surge of energy, knocking her back. She hit the ground hard, gasping for breath as the witch's laughter echoed around her.
Foolish child, the witch whispered, her voice curling through the air like smoke. Did you think it would be so easy? The spell is bound to me, to my very blood. You cannot break it without paying the price." Lila struggled to her feet, her mind racing. She had touched the book, felt the pulse of magic within it, and in that brief moment, she had seen something, a glimpse of the spell, of the words that bound the broomsticks to their dance. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Enough to know that the key to stopping the curse wasn't just in the book. It was in her. As the witch's laughter faded into the night, Lila took a deep breath, her eyes narrowing. The threads of the spell still pulsed around her, tangled and ancient, but now she knew where they led. If she could find the fracture, if she could break just one of the threads, the entire curse would unravel. The broomsticks' dance was far from over, but Lila was ready to fight. The wind in the forest had shifted, now colder, heavier, as though the very air was aware of the ancient magic at play. Lila's mind raced with fragments of the spell she had glimpsed, pieces of a puzzle that felt just beyond her reach. Her fingers still tingled from the pulse of the witch's spellbook, but now there was something else. A deeper awareness of the power that coursed through the forest, through the village, and through her. The witch stood in the center of the stone circle, her cold smile unwavering, though her eyes watched Lila with a new intensity. It was clear she had sensed the shift in Lila, the way her gift had begun to awaken in ways neither of them had anticipated. The threads of magic that danced around them both pulsed in rhythm with the wind, almost as if they, too, were alive. Lila stepped closer, her gaze never leaving the witch's. "The dance," she began, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. "It's not just a curse, is it? It's a ritual, a way to bind the power beneath the village." The witch's smile faltered ever so slightly, the briefest flicker of surprise passing across her face. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by the cold, knowing gaze that had haunted Lila since she first stepped into the forest. "You are perceptive, child," the witch said softly. "Yes, it is a ritual, one older than the village itself. The broomsticks are merely the instruments, the puppets of a greater spell. With each turn of their dance, the power buried beneath the earth grows stronger. And when their dance is complete, the veil between the worlds will tear, and magic will be restored." Lila's heart sank. She had suspected as much, but hearing the witch confirm it made the truth all the more terrifying. The broomsticks weren't just dancing for the sake of causing mayhem. They were building toward something far more dangerous. If the dance was completed, it wouldn't just be the village that was destroyed. The very balance between the worlds would be shattered. "You're using the village," Lila said, her voice growing stronger. "Using its magic, its people, as part of your spell." The witch's eyes gleamed in the dim light of the forest. The village has always been a part of the spell. It was built upon the bones of an ancient power, a power that the villagers foolishly sought to bury. But magic cannot be buried forever. It will rise as it always does. Lila clenched her fists, her thoughts swirling with the weight of what she had uncovered. The village, her home, had unknowingly been at the heart of an ancient magical ritual for generations. The broomsticks were merely the visible part of a much larger, much darker plan. But as she stood there, staring into the depths of the witch's cold gaze, Lila began to see something else, something hidden in the witch's words. The dance wasn't just a mindless spell. It had a purpose, a structure, a rhythm. And that rhythm was tied to the land, to the village itself. The threads of magic that bound the broomsticks weren't just connected to the witch. They were connected to the very earth beneath them. The dance was a key. Lila's mind raced as the pieces began to fall into place. The broomsticks weren't just performing a chaotic ritual. They were following a specific pattern, a rhythm that tied them to the hidden magic beneath the village. And if there was a pattern, then there had to be a way to disrupt it. The witch seemed to sense Lila's growing understanding, her smile returning, more sinister than before. "You think you can stop it?" she asked, her voice a soft taunt. "The dance cannot be broken. The magic is too strong. You may have the sight, child, but you are still just a child." But Lila was no longer listening to the witch's taunts. Her eyes were fixed on the broomsticks, their wild movements now clear in a way they hadn't been before. She could see the threads of magic, pulsing in time with their dance, and beyond that, she could see the pattern. It was subtle, hidden beneath layers of chaos, but it was there.
The broomsticks were moving in circles, larger then smaller, like ripples on a pond. Each time they completed a circle, the magic in the air grew thicker, stronger, and the earth beneath them trembled with anticipation. But the circles weren't perfect. There was a flaw, a tiny misstep in the rhythm, a place where the threads of magic faltered, ever so slightly. Lila's heart raced as the realization struck her. The dance could be broken. The flaw in the pattern was small, almost invisible, but it was there. And if she could disrupt it, if she could pull on the right thread, the entire spell would unravel. The witch, unaware of Lila's discovery, stepped closer, her voice low and dangerous. "You are too late, child. The dance is nearly complete. Soon the worlds will merge, and magic will be mine once more." But Lila wasn't afraid anymore. She had seen the flaw in the spell, the tiny crack in the magic that bound the broomsticks to their dance. And now, with her gift of sight, she knew how to stop it. As the witch's laughter echoed through the forest, Lila took a deep breath, her eyes locked on the broomsticks as they whirled and spun, faster and faster. The time had come to break the dance, to unravel the spell that had bound the village for so long. And this time, Lila wasn't going to let the magic win. The forest seemed to hold its breath, the wind stilled, and the air hung heavy with the weight of magic. The moon, veiled behind thick clouds, cast a dim, silvery glow over the stone circle, where Lila stood at the edge of a decision she could barely comprehend. The flaw in the dance was there, a single thread she could pull to unravel the entire spell. But with it came the terrifying realization of what might follow. The witch stood across from her, watching with an unreadable expression. There was no fear in her eyes, only a cold certainty. She had woven this magic over centuries, and in her heart, she believed it could not be broken. Lila's fingers twitched at her sides, her mind racing as she replayed the broomstick's movements in her head, over and over, searching for the exact moment when the pattern faltered. She could see it clearly now, the circle tightening, the threads of magic vibrating with tension. But even as she saw the path to disrupting the dance, doubt crept in. What if breaking the spell didn't stop the destruction? What if it unleashed something even worse? The witch's voice cut through the silence, soft and dangerous. You hesitate, child. You feel the power, don't you? You see the path before you, but you are afraid to take it. Lila swallowed, her throat dry. She didn't respond, but the witch's words hung in the air like a poison, seeping into her thoughts. Yes, she was afraid. She had never wielded magic like this before, had never faced something so vast and ancient. The weight of it pressed down on her, almost suffocating in its intensity. I know what you seek, the witch continued, her voice low and hypnotic. You think you can break the spell. You believe your sight gives you an advantage. But you are mistaken. This magic is not something you can untangle so easily. It is woven into the very bones of this land. To break it would be to break everything. Lila's breath caught. The witch's words stirred something deep within her, a fear she hadn't yet acknowledged. What if the witch was right? What if stopping the dance meant undoing not just the curse, but the very fabric of the village itself? What if it meant tearing apart the magic that held everything together? But then she remembered the destruction. The broomsticks whirling through the village, tearing at roofs and scattering crops. The frantic fear in the eyes of the villagers. She remembered the chaos, the wild energy that threatened to consume everything if left unchecked. And she remembered her grandmother's words, spoken in hushed tones years ago. Magic must be balanced, child. It is not inherently good or evil. It is the one who wields it who decides. Lila straightened, her heart pounding in her chest. The witch had woven her spell through the land, but she had done so with selfish intent, driven by her own desire for power. The magic had been warped, twisted into something dangerous. and Lila could see now that it was her responsibility to set it right, even if she didn't fully understand the consequences. She took a step forward, her eyes locking with the witch's. "You've bound this land with your magic, but it's not yours to control. The village, the people, the power, it belongs to them, not you." The witch's smile faded, her eyes narrowing. "You are a fool if you think you can stop this. The dance is nearly complete. The power beneath the earth is rising, and soon the veil between the worlds will tear. You cannot fight what has already begun." Lila clenched her fists, feeling the threads of magic humming around her, the rhythm of the broomsticks' dance pulsing through the air. She could see the floor now, clearer than ever. It was small, almost imperceptible, but it was enough. If she could disrupt it, even for a moment, the entire pattern would collapse. Without another word, Lila closed her eyes, focusing on the threads of light that only her sight could reveal. She let the rhythm of the dance wash over her, feeling the magic swirl around her like a storm. And then, with a deep breath, she reached out with her mind, her hands trembling as she grasped the single thread that held the spell together. The moment her fingers touched it, the world seemed to freeze. For a heartbeat, everything was still. The wind, the trees, even the broomsticks suspended in mid-air, as though time itself had paused. And then, with a sharp snapping sound, the thread broke. The effect was immediate. The broomsticks faltered in their dance, their wild movements slowing, then stopping altogether. The threads of magic unraveled before Lila's eyes, dissolving into the air like mist caught in a sudden breeze. The air crackled with energy, the remnants of the spell dissipating into the night. The witch gasped, her eyes widening in shock as the magic she had so carefully woven fell apart around her. "No, it cannot be." Lila opened her eyes, her heart racing as she watched the broomsticks fall to the ground, lifeless and still. The village, for the first time that night, was quiet. But the witch, she wasn't finished. With a furious cry, the witch stepped forward, her hands outstretched as she tried to summon the magic that had been torn from her grasp. The air around her shimmered, but it was weak, flickering like the dying embers of a fire. You've ruined everything," she hissed, her voice filled with venom. Lila took a step back, her pulse racing. The witch was still dangerous, even without her spell. But as the last remnants of the curse faded into the night, Lila realized something else. She had done it. She had broken the dance. And the balance of magic, at least for now, had been restored. The silence that followed the breaking of the spell was suffocating, as though the very air had been sucked from the forest. Lila stood in the clearing, her breath coming in shallow gasps, the weight of the shattered magic pressing down on her like an invisible force. The broomsticks, once whirling through the air in a mad dance, now lay motionless on the ground, their magic spent. But the tension that gripped the night had not eased. If anything, it had grown heavier, darker, as if something terrible had been unleashed. The witch stood at the center of the stone circle, her face contorted in a mask of fury and disbelief. Her hands trembled at her sides, and the cold, calculated demeanor that had clung to her like a shadow was gone. Now, there was only raw anger and something more, fear. "You've made a grave mistake, child," the witch hissed, her voice low and venomous. "You've broken the dance, but you have not stopped what is coming. The power beneath this village, it has been awakened. It cannot be undone." Lila's heart pounded in her chest, her pulse racing as the witch's words sank in. She had thought that breaking the spell would be the end of it, that stopping the Broomsticks dance would save the village. But now, as she stood in the eerie silence of the forest, she realized that the witch's magic had only been the beginning. The ground beneath her feet trembled, ever so slightly, as though something deep within the earth was stirring. The air around her grew colder, and the shadows cast by the towering trees seemed to lengthen, stretching out like dark fingers, creeping toward the edge of the stone circle. Lila could feel it, a pulse of energy, faint at first, but growing stronger with each passing second. The power that the witch had spoken of, the power buried beneath the village, was waking up. "I didn't mean for this to happen," Lila whispered, more to herself than to the witch. She had wanted to protect the village, to stop the destruction, but now it seemed that in breaking the spell, she had set something far worse in motion. The witch's lips curled into a bitter smile, her eyes gleaming with a mix of anger and triumph. "Of course you didn't, but you were never meant to understand. The magic beneath this village is old, older than the stones you stand upon, older than the village itself. It has waited, slumbering beneath the earth for centuries. And now, thanks to your meddling, it is free." Lila took a step back, her hands trembling at her sides. She could feel the magic in the air shifting, growing darker, more dangerous. The shadows around her twisted and writhed, their movements unnatural, like living things crawling through the undergrowth. The village, still hidden behind the trees, seemed impossibly far away, as though it had been swallowed by the creeping darkness. The witch stepped forward, her smile fading into a look of grim determination. "You broke the dance, yes, but in doing so, you broke the seal that held the true magic at bay. Now, there is nothing that can stop it from rising, not even you." Lila's breath hitched in her throat. The threads of magic that had once been so clear, so vibrant in her mind, now seemed distant, fading into the darkness that pressed in from all sides. She had always believed that her gift, the sight, would help her understand magic. that it would allow her to see beyond the surface of things. But now, standing on the edge of something she couldn't fully comprehend, she felt lost. The ground trembled again, more violently this time, and the stone circle cracked beneath her feet, fissures snaking through the earth. The pulse of magic was growing, a low hum that thrummed through the air like the beating of a massive heart. Lila's gaze darted to the edge of the clearing, where the shadows had begun to move in earnest, twisting and swirling as though alive. She knew then that the witch was right. The magic beneath the village, the magic that had been buried for so long, was no longer bound by the witch's curse. It was free, and it was rising. The witch, sensing the shift, turned to face the darkness with a gleam of satisfaction in her eyes. The villagers will pay for what they did to me, for what they did to magic. They buried it, tried to erase it. But magic is eternal, and now it will reclaim what is rightfully its own. Lila's heart pounded in her chest, her mind racing. She had to do something, anything, to stop the power that was building around them. But how? The spell was broken, and the magic that had once been contained was now spilling into the world. And then she remembered. The broomsticks. They had been a part of the dance, bound to the rhythm of the magic. But they had also been connected to something deeper, something older than the witch's curse. If the broomsticks had been the key to starting the dance, perhaps they were also the key to stopping it. Lila knelt beside one of the fallen broomsticks, her fingers trembling as she touched its weathered handle. She could feel a faint pulse of energy still lingering within it, a remnant of the magic that had once animated it. And in that pulse, she sensed a connection, a thread that linked the broomsticks not just to the spell, but to the very magic of the land itself. The shadows crept closer, dark tendrils reaching for her as the witch watched in silence. But Lila had no time for fear. With a deep breath, she closed her eyes, reaching out with her sight, searching for the threads of magic that still bound the broomsticks to the ancient power beneath the earth. The dance of shadows had begun, but Lila was not ready to let it finish. The shadows encroached upon the clearing, their dark tendrils curling like smoke, thick and suffocating. The ground beneath Lila trembled, the pulse of ancient magic rising with every breath she took. She knelt beside the broomstick, her fingers trembling as she grasped its wooden handle, feeling the faint remnants of magic still clinging to it. The air hummed with a dark energy, the shadows swirling like a gathering storm. But Lila focused only on the pulse, the steady thrum of magic that still bound the broomsticks to the land. The witch watched her in silence, her eyes gleaming with cold amusement. "You think you can stop this? The magic is beyond you, child. It is older than you, older than anything you could ever comprehend." Lila didn't respond. Her mind was racing, her thoughts swirling as she tried to piece together what she had glimpsed in the Broomsticks dance. There was still magic left in them, magic that was connected to the deeper forces at play. If she could tap into that, she might be able to stop the shadows from fully awakening. She closed her eyes, letting her gift of sight take over. The world around her fell away, and for a moment, all was still. In the silence, she could see it. The threads of magic that had woven through the dance, still faintly pulsing in the air. They were tangled now, fractured by the broken spell, but they were there. And at the center of it all, she saw the flaw, the small crack in the pattern that had started everything. The magic wasn't just chaotic, it was searching. The broomsticks had been part of a larger ritual, but they weren't the cause of the destruction. They were a tool, a way to harness the ancient power buried beneath the village. But now, without the rhythm of the dance to contain it, the magic was spilling out, twisting into the shadows that threatened to consume everything. Lila's fingers tightened around the broomstick, and she took a deep breath, focusing on the threads of magic that still flickered around her. If she could just untangle them, if she could redirect the magic, maybe, just maybe, she could stop the shadows from fully awakening. "I may not understand it," Lila whispered, her voice barely audible over the rising wind. "But I can feel it." The witch's eyes narrowed, and for the first time there was a flicker of uncertainty in her gaze. "You fool! You cannot control what has been set in motion." But Lila wasn't listening. She could feel the magic now, a current running through her, pulling her into its depths. She let herself fall into it, her mind reaching out to the threads of light that still shimmered faintly in the air. With her sight, she could see where the magic had gone wrong, where the shadows had begun to twist and writhe, breaking free from the ritual's control. Slowly, carefully, she began to weave the threads back together, pulling them tight, focusing on the flaw in the pattern. The broomstick in her hand vibrated, a faint glow surrounding it as the magic responded to her touch. It was small, fragile, but it was enough. The shadows around the clearing recoiled, as if sensing the shift in the magic. The air crackled with energy, the darkness swirling in agitation. Lila could feel the pressure building, the ancient power pushing against her. But she held firm, her mind focused on the rhythm of the dance. The witch stepped forward, her face twisted in rage. "Stop this! You will destroy us all!" But Lila didn't stop. She could feel the magic growing stronger, the threads of the spell weaving together once more. The broomsticks, once lifeless on the ground, began to twitch, their handles lifting as if pulled by invisible hands. The shadows hissed, their tendrils retreating as the light of the magic grew brighter, cutting through the darkness. The ground shook beneath her, and for a moment Lila thought she might lose control. The magic was too strong, too vast, and it was slipping through her fingers like water. But then, in the midst of the chaos, she heard it. A faint melodic hum, the rhythm of the dance. It was still there, buried beneath the layers of magic, waiting to be found. With a final desperate surge, Lila pulled the threads of the spell tight, focusing all her energy on the rhythm. The broomsticks lifted into the air, their movements slow and deliberate, their dance resuming once more. But this time, the dance was different. It wasn't wild or chaotic. It was controlled, purposeful. The shadows recoiled further, their dark forms shrinking as the light of the magic filled the clearing. The witch screamed, her voice lost in the wind, as the power she had sought to unleash was drawn back into the earth, sealed once more by the rhythm of the dance. Lila collapsed to the ground, her breath coming in ragged gasps as the last of the magic settled. The broomsticks fell lifeless once again, their dance complete. The shadows were gone, the darkness fading into the night as if it had never been. The witch stood in the center of the stone circle, her face pale and drained of its previous malice. The magic was gone, her control shattered. For a moment, she stared at Lila in stunned silence, as if unable to comprehend what had just happened. "You," she whispered, her voice hollow. "You've ruined everything." Lila didn't respond. She was too tired, too drained to care. The village was safe for now, and the power beneath the earth was once again sealed. The dance had ended, and with it the shadows had been banished. For now.